Good morning and welcome to Living Local 15. On today's special Wealth Wednesday episode, we are highlighting our three-part Widow's Advice series from Foster Financial. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Fashion, food, and fun. You're watching Living Local 15 with your host, Jessica Williams.
This segment sponsored by Foster Financial. Hi, welcome to Women's Wealth Wednesday, providing you tips and information for any stage of your life. And I'm so excited to be joined by Caleb Doane, who is the Vice President at Foster Financial. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm really excited about what you're going to share today because we are talking about such a sensitive yet important journey of someone's life that they may encounter. So if a woman finds herself that she is widowed, she has lost her spouse, I know that there is so many steps that she has to take in order to make sure that she is good with all of the logistics and the paperwork and making sure legally and financially everything's okay. So you're going to provide some information for us today and get that kicked off. So please share with me, what will you share today?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, this is a huge sort of financial pivotal moment for a woman in her life, probably the biggest change since her and her spouse retired. And so this just has sweeping changes. It's possible that, she's had a joint account with her husband for 50 years. And so going from two people to one person and doing income planning for that is just a massive change in somebody's sort of financial future.
Right.
And so I really wanted to start sort of a segment series here where we talk about the main three things that a recent widow would need to do to ensure that she's set up for success financially.
Okay.
And I think those three buckets could probably fit into the main documents that she would need to gather, the main people that she would need to contact, and then lastly, the main actions that she would need to take moving forward. So today I kind of wanted to focus on that first big bucket of all the documents that someone would need to pull together.
Yes, that probably is the most overwhelming step and the most important to gather and to find and to be at that mental stage to know where everything is at. So with this list that you're going to give us or share with us what they need, this is the first step to be ready. So what type of documents would they need?
Yeah, absolutely. There's really probably four that come to mind. I would say the first one is any big legal documents that somebody has. And I think most people's mind immediately goes to maybe a will that they have. I think that's really the big one. And most people can kind of point to the cupboard that has the will that they drew up, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. We often recommend getting it updated probably a little more frequently just because there are legislation changes that can impact stuff. But there's other legal documents that people might not think of immediately. I'd say one is if people have a family trust that was set up at any point, it's really important to make sure you know where that's at.
Okay.
And then one that oftentimes slips people's mind is power of attorney documents. So the power of attorney documents, if people aren't familiar, basically allows somebody else to act on their behalf for financial decisions. And so most of the time, people have their spouses are each other's power of attorney, and a lot of times there are successor power of attorneys in there too. So, maybe a recent widow, her husband has been her power of attorney for a long time, meaning he was able to make financial decisions, if she became incapacitated for whatever reason. Now that might switch where it's, her child or maybe two of her children need to work together to, make any sort of these decisions. And so it's important to read the language in that power of attorney document and understand how it's set up.
Yes. Okay, so we have those, and then what's the next one?
Yeah, so legal documents are kind of the first one. Another one that comes to mind is financial statements. So you'd probably be surprised, like a lot of times, even when couples come in for maybe an initial consultation, they have sort of this stack of documents that has their different statements in it. And a lot of times, even they in that stage are somewhat confused on how many accounts that they have. They think, hey,
Okay.
I have a couple 401ks. I think, it's just these three, but we might need to call to double check on this. And so a lot of times there might be sort of a lack of organization there. And that's sort of amplified if it's a widow trying to take care of a lot of this stuff, because maybe her husband had multiple accounts that he wasn't even aware of.
Right.
And so it's really important that at that stage to kind of take a look, gather a lot of those financial documents, and understand where each of those sort of reside.
So you speak about, I want to touch on the organization side of it, because to your point, if there are multiple accounts, how would one know? So it's as if a plan needs to be set into place between a couple to say, we're going to have a designated location in our home that's going to have these documents. You may not need to know this information right now, but one day you should. So do you recommend having like this secret file box or folder of just like, this is where we're putting all the information? These are my accounts.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And typically, the way that these accounts are set up, oftentimes they'll send maybe quarterly statements or annual statements. Recently, they've really been trying to get people to sign up for the email statements, so that can get a little scary. You got to make sure that you check through emails to make sure there aren't additional accounts there that maybe somebody isn't aware of. Certainly important to have a plan, have those financial documents. The other one that comes to mind is bills that people have. So this is another really important kind of set of documents to make sure somebody's gathering. And I guess how difficult this would be kind of depends on maybe how involved the wife was before her husband passed away in paying some of these bills. Sometimes the wife is the one who has the checkbook out and is writing these on a monthly basis, and so that makes the transition a little easier. But other times there might be bills that are set up on auto pay. Maybe the husband was a member of some organization that has, auto pay dues or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so it's important to kind of take a look at those things and make sure that you're set up to pay those if you need to, or cancel them if you don't.
Yes. Cancel them if you don't. That's the big thing. It's like you don't want these bills to constantly come out after someone has been deceased. And I just want to make a transition real quick, or connectivity between a widower, but also single folks. You know, more and more people are single. They do not have spouses. And this type of information is so important. If something was to happen to them, to have their information all gathered in a folder and put somewhere for their beneficiary, and assigning beneficiaries. That's a whole, we have to get on that a whole other day, because that is important. I think that if something happens to someone, families aren't prepared for what to do next with their finances.
And maybe you don't know where a lot of their statements are at. It can be a good time, maybe next time you're visiting them at home, just to say, hey, at least, point me towards the cabinet that we need to make sure we're aware of. So that's certainly a thing to take, I guess, account of too. And then really the last document that I wanted to mention that a lot of people forget about is getting extra copies of the death certificate.
Yes.
So this is a thing that people maybe get 1 or 2 copies, but surprisingly, there are a lot of insurance companies, a lot of investment custodians, a lot of stakeholders that will require the original copy of the death certificate. And so a lot of people just say, hey, get 10 copies, get 10 original copies right away. That way you don't have to call them back and pay additional fees, but just get those right up front so that you're taken care of.
Okay, that's wonderful. So having that will and that trust, having the death certificate rather, and having the bills and the financial statements.
Exactly, you got it.
And that's the toolkit just to start off. Okay, well that was great. I'm excited about the next Women's Wealth Wednesday to find out the next steps and just staying equipped, for anything that could possibly happen in life. So thank you, Caleb, so much. And to get more information about financial services and the holistic financial planning and retirement planning that Foster Financial has to offer, you can contact them for a complimentary consultation, and we'll have that information listed below, and we'll be right back. This segment sponsored by Foster Financial. Welcome to Women's Wealth Wednesday. If you've been following this series, then you know that we've been talking about helping widows who have recently lost someone gain the financial advisement that they need for the next steps. And joining me today is Caleb Doane with Foster Financial. Hi, Caleb.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so in our last session, we talked about gathering documents. That was the first step if someone, unfortunately, was to lose someone. What's the next step?
Yeah, good question. So last week we kind of talked about gathering all those big documents that really make sense if somebody's recently widowed. And really all of these steps have to do with setting yourself up for a productive financial future,
Right.
Because it's such a big financial change to be widowed. And so really today, kind of that next step is figuring out the exact people that you need to talk to. Okay. And there's really three that kind of come to mind. And so the first one is speaking with your spouse's former employer, all right? And this is really important if there's a pension in the mix, but even if there isn't a pension, a lot of times there can be life insurance policies that people funded through work. Sometimes big employers like GM, for example, might be paying for certain life insurance policies on their workers, even in
Right.
retirement. And so it's important to call them and kind of figure out exactly what steps need to be taken. With a pension specifically, there's kind of a whole range of pension payout options that
Right.
people choose when they elect their pension. And so, on one side of the spectrum, there's, the straight life or single life payout, and this is the highest monthly benefit, but this basically just means that payout pays the same monthly benefit for the worker's entire life, and then when they pass away, it completely stops and it doesn't go to anybody else.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On the other side of the spectrum, people can choose a payout strategy that gives you a little less per month, but when they pass away, 100% of the benefit goes to their, surviving spouse for the rest of their life. And then there's a whole bunch in between. There's, 75% payout, 65, all the way down. And so a lot of times people elect this when they turn 65 and retire, and they lived a long and happy retirement and maybe passed away at 85. And a lot of times the spouse might think, I don't remember, was it 100%? Was it
Right.
75%? I'm not sure. And so it's important to give that company a call, let them know that your spouse passed away, and then see what you can expect in terms of the pension payout there too.
Can we talk about pensions a bit more? Because as we are preparing for what may happen, of course, people can choose their electives right now. So is that a service that you offer as far as breaking down which pension plan would be best for someone?
That's a great question. And yes, we absolutely advise on that. And that's a huge decision because when somebody makes that choice, it's in almost all cases final. I mean, you can't change that, a week down the road, a year down the road. And there are situations where, somebody might have chosen a joint life payout. Let's say a husband chooses a joint life payout for him and his spouse. And that means that they get a slightly lower benefit, but, if he were to pass away, it would cover her. Let's say, heaven forbid, 1 year down the road, his wife passes away. That means, he's getting a lower benefit for the rest of his life when there's really no added benefit to him of covering his spouse because she passed away before him. And so there's actually different life insurance strategies that we can kind of bring into the mix to sort of mitigate that risk and make sure you're choosing the best option for you and your family.
Okay, that's good. That's good stuff. Okay, so first person in contact, your spouse's employer.
Yep.
Who's the next person?
Yeah, the next one is actually the Social Security office.
Oh, okay.
And especially if they're already collecting Social Security, which most people are, if they're in the being widowed, and so the Social Security system, since it's a government system, is very confusing.
Yes.
No huge surprise there. But one of the things that typically happens is if a husband and wife are both collecting Social Security, if the husband passes away and his benefit is higher than what the wife's is, depending on the circumstances, oftentimes she's able to get that higher benefit. So she no longer gets hers, but she gets her husband's higher benefit. And there's a lot of things that can play into this, like how long that they were married, how old they are, if they're the full retirement age or not, if she gets remarried afterwards. There's so many different factors that will actually determine how much she gets. And that really brings us to the third one, which is, you need to chat with a financial advisor about a lot of this, because all of these will have a huge impact on your financial plan. And so a lot of times we see that, financial advisors, maybe they dealt with the husband predominantly. And so sometimes, widows can be less comfortable communicating with the financial advisor. And so that's why it's so important to establish a relationship beforehand, make sure you understand your financial plan too, and that someone understands what the plan is moving forward if you do become widowed.
Yeah, that's so good. And really, because when we talk about pensions and even Social Security in this conversation, those are things that may be fleeting, they're not guaranteed. And so that retirement planning in other ways is something that you all help with and kind of get people situated for the full picture and not be so dependent on these things that may not be consistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And setting all of this stuff up beforehand is the best possible scenario.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's, someone losing a spouse is one of the worst things to possibly go through. And so having sort of the finances taken care of and something that you don't have to stress about on top of everything else is a wonderful blessing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Caleb. That is such good information. And if you would like more information about Foster Financial or take advantage of their consultation, then we'll have that information listed below, and we'll be right back. This segment sponsored by Foster Financial.
Living Local 15, proudly driven by the Kelly Automotive Group.
It's time for Women's Wealth Wednesday, providing useful financial tips from Foster Financial each and every week. And we are catering to women today. And back with me is your financial specialist, Caleb Doane. Hi, Caleb.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going really well.
Good. Well, we've been talking for the last few weeks about the proper steps that widowers, so women who have lost their spouse, unfortunately, should take financially. So step number 1 was gathering the documents. Step number 2 was contacting the right people. And now Caleb's going to share with us step number 3 to conclude this series.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And of course, this is just a massive financial change in somebody's life, and not to mention just a big life change too. And so of course, after taking care of all the personal aspects that go into that, it's important to start looking at the financial aspects as well. And so you certainly mentioned kind of those first 2 buckets, and really the last one is about taking certain actions. Okay. So within taking actions, I think there's probably 3 main things that come to mind. And the first one is adjusting beneficiaries on any accounts.
Okay.
So a lot of times what people will do is they'll have primary beneficiaries listed, but they won't have contingent beneficiaries listed, which is an important step that we always like to have people take. But in most cases, a husband and a wife will have each other listed as the 100% primary beneficiary. And so, for example, a wife in this scenario might have her husband listed as, the primary beneficiary on her IRA and a non-qualified account or whatever it might be. And if he passes away, now there are no beneficiaries listed on the account. And so that can kind of open it up to issues if she were to pass away, exactly how that money would be inherited.
Right.
So that's certainly something we like to take a look at.
So question for you with that, with the beneficiary, how many is recommended to have on an account?
Yeah, it's a good question. Typically, as long as there's a primary beneficiary and contingent beneficiaries, you're typically have kind of covered your bases there. And so what most people do is they'll have their spouse as the 100% primary beneficiary, and then if they have 2 kids, they list both kids as 50-50 contingent beneficiaries.
Okay.
And what would happen, where the contingent beneficiaries would come into play is maybe if both spouses were to pass away at the same time, then it's like, okay, that's when it goes down to the contingent beneficiaries. Or if one spouse passes away and then the beneficiaries are never updated, then it goes back down to the contingents after that second spouse passes.
So updating our beneficiaries, and then what's the next step?
The next step would be setting a budget. Okay, so like we talked about, it's a major financial change for somebody, and I think a lot of people maybe have a misconception that when it goes from 2 people in a household down to 1, that the expenses are kind of cut in half. And a lot of times it's actually not the case.
Right, doubled.
Right, yeah, the expenses, the figure we typically use is that, a widow will retain probably about 80% of her monthly expenses that she had, when she was living with her husband in the past. Because, if somebody has a mortgage, that's going to stay exactly the same. If somebody has, cable, streaming services, Wi-Fi, whatever it might be, that's going to stay exactly the same with one person as it was with two. And so if somebody was, trying to make ends meet before, it can be even more important, when somebody is widowed, to kind of take another look at the budget and see exactly how you're going to make ends meet going forward.
Yeah, and as part of that, I mean, when you think about the accounts that are set up, so most of the time there may be joint accounts. So part of that budget step, would that be rethinking if you should change the account altogether? Because I know last week we kind of talked about, by contacting the right people, you want to make sure that you don't have finances or auto drafts coming out. So is it best to close down the joint account and just start fresh?
Yeah. Fortunately, a lot of the joint accounts kind of have a baked-in beneficiary in them, in that if one person passes away, the other just retains control of that account.
Okay.
So it's still important to contact, the bank or contact the financial advisor, let them know that, hey, I'm the only person listed on this account now because my spouse passed away. But typically you're able to still retain that account, which is a really nice benefit of that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
and then the final step.
Yeah, exactly. The final step, and we've talked about it before, is really contacting a financial advisor and chatting with them about it. Because typically a financial advisor can help with, those other two steps we talked about and those other buckets that we talked about in previous weeks. In terms of gathering documents, a good financial advisor is going to have those on hand for you. When it comes to contacting the right people, like the Social Security office, they can certainly help you with that too. And when it comes to updating beneficiaries or setting a budget, a good holistic or comprehensive financial advisor is going to have this scenario kind of baked into the plan. And so, even though it's a difficult situation, they'll be able to help advise on how to move forward.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Caleb,
Thank you.
for those awesome steps and just preparing us for what we need to know. And if you are interested in a complimentary consultation from Foster Financial, you can contact them today, and we'll be right back. This segment sponsored by Foster Financial.
Follow us on social media at Living Local 15. Content segments during today's Living Local 15 were paid for by these sponsors.